were you born gay? When did you become gay? When did you realize you were gay? And how did that come about?
Well, when did you realize you were straight?
I've always been straight. When did you realize you were gay?
I've always been gay.
So from a child coming up, from entering into the lifestyle, you were gay.
Well,
there wasn't an act in your life that led to that choice.
When you was 5 years old, you had no idea what gay meant. Being gay is like being an alcoholic. It's a sickness.
I always knew that I was attracted to guys. I felt a lot of pressure growing up to be heterosexual.
I really did not want to be gay. Why would anybody just want to be gay for the sake of being gay? I mean, who wants to possibly be disowned by your family and have your friends disappear on you and not be able to have the same rights as everybody else, basically be viewed as a second-class citizen? I mean, I just don't understand why anybody would think that somebody would just choose to be gay for the sake of being gay. That would imply that I'm actually attracted to women, but I've just decided to force myself to have sex with men. Like, it doesn't make any sense, especially because I want to say to the people who claim that it's a choice, could you make the choice to be gay if you're straight?
I've been listening to a lot of arguments for and against gay marriage lately, since it's a hot political topic of our generation. A lot of these arguments turn into brutal attacks either against people being gay or against those who do not agree with homosexuality. The basis of many arguments against gay marriage and homosexuality in general is that being gay is a choice. An interesting idea behind this is that when asked, most individuals who say this believe that they were born straight. In other words, they never made a conscious decision about their sexuality. This introduces the idea of cognitive dissonance. You might ask, what exactly is cognitive dissonance? Cognitive dissonance is defined as a psychological conflict resulting from simultaneously held incongruous beliefs and attitudes. In my experience, this concept often manifests itself in the struggle between doing something morally correct and doing something fun and exciting. For instance, I received my driver's license in the mail a few weeks ago. To earn this credential, I had to learn as many traffic laws as possible and pass a series of written and physical tests. I knew all of the laws necessary to become a safe driver and desired to follow them to protect myself and those around me. Last weekend, I was driving on the freeway very late at night. There was no one around. I felt as if I could drive as fast as possible without the chance of hurting anyone. I would have made it to my destination much more quickly, and it would have been a thrill. Although I desired to follow all of the traffic laws to keep myself safe, I also desired to hold the pedal to the metal and see how fast my car would go. This is an example of cognitive dissonance because my two desires were conflicting. I could not have followed the traffic laws while experiencing the thrill of hitting 100 miles per hour riding down the freeway. This idea relates back to homosexuality and choice, because when individuals believe that they are born with their sexuality, yet deny that others are, they are experiencing cognitive dissonance. This idea is clearly portrayed in this audio clip.
I think the people, it depends on what they grow up finding out. I think it's a choice later in life, but it depends on upbringing.
When did you choose to be straight?
That's a good call, man. I didn't choose to be.
We observe the way that this individual says that others choose to be homosexual, yet he never chose to be heterosexual. In essence, he says that he was born with his sexuality, but other people with a different sexuality choose to be that way. This displays a degree of cognitive dissonance. Through the theory of knowledge, way of knowing, reason, we can determine that if many heterosexual subjects asked believe that they are born into their sexuality, the same idea is likely to apply to those who are homosexual or who have other sexual preferences.
There are two general points of view regarding homosexuality and choice. Conservatives generally believe it is, in fact, a choice, and an immoral one at that. They tend to feel that society and government should discourage homosexual behavior. Liberal supporters of gay rights believe that sexual preference is biologically determined, and gay individuals should be protected because it is an aspect of their identity that cannot be altered. Although homosexuals claim that their sexuality is not a choice, many do recall having heterosexual attractions in their early lives and becoming homosexual at a later point, with no event causing it or choice of free will being made. Natural sciences and reason have provided a plausible explanation for this phenomenon of changing sexuality. Science Journal conducted research experiments in 1993 that showed strong evidence of the existence of a gay gene made apparent by distinct features on certain regions of a gay individual's X chromosomes. Because these landmarks were absent on an inherently straight individual's chromosomes, logic leads to a safe assumption that sexuality is, at least somewhat, biologically determined. The sudden changes in some people's sexuality, in contrast with those who have felt they were gay since birth, can be explained by hormonal influences in the womb. The brain has influenced your sexuality since before you were even born, but the brain does not stop developing at birth. Because people with different sexualities do not share identical biologies, they cannot be expected to understand each other's worlds and preferences. Helen Keller, a famous individual deeply misunderstood in her time, once stated that people don't like to think, and if one thinks, one must reach conclusions, which are not always pleasant. For example, many conservative creationists have problems with scientific concepts that conflict with their time-old traditional beliefs in a 6,000-year-old Earth and a great global flood occurring 4,300 years ago. While many people are willing to accept their error after enough convincing evidence on a subject is uncovered, others will go to great lengths to rationalize away dissenting ideas, especially when they receive support from a network of others who reinforce a major worldview or ideology. Fear and self-protection mechanisms activated by internal cognitive dissonance result in either an introverted reaction characterized by ignorance and an unwillingness to accept multiple perspectives or to empathize, or an extroverted reaction of attempts to destroy or attack institutions supporting conflicting beliefs and ideas. These reactions have been observed in radical parties both in favor of and against the notion that sexuality is a choice.
Extreme cognitive dissonance often arises in emotionally fueled situations. Let's examine another example of cognitive dissonance within the LGBT community. Many see the gay community as huge advocates of tolerance, peace, love, freedom, etc. We see gay pride parades and campaigns such as It Gets Better, which promote acceptance. This advocacy for tolerance is often prevalent, especially when it relates to issues that directly affect the community. We see some dissonance in that the community is very passionate about tolerance of their community, but often deprecates religious, social, and political institutions that disapprove of their love interests. Criminal acts have been committed against religious and political institutions that do not support the LGBT community. One such act is described here.
A new kind of domestic terrorism is in town. One that entails chanting blasphemy, destruction of property, performing lewd acts in front of, and throwing condoms to children while telling them it's okay to be gay. Endangering lives by threatening arson and diverting emergency personnel. On Sunday, November 9th, 2008, a militant homosexual group disrupted a service at Mountain of Hope Church, which is described as a Pentecostal megachurch in Lansing, Michigan. Distracting the church's security guards, several of the demonstrators stood up and shouted, "It's okay to be gay," and Jesus was a homo. 30 members dressed in pink and black terrorist garb stormed into the sanctuary. Their antics included unfurling a rainbow flag from the balcony, setting off a fire alarm, throwing flyers and condoms at the congregation. 2 lesbians stormed the pulpit and put on a lewd display in front of the families and their children. Security also discovered the members of the group were performing sex acts in the restroom.
Although the community preaches love and tolerance, they are willing to attack others emotionally, mentally, and physically because they have different views than them. This is ironic because the community is attacking others' views, not showing the tolerance or love that they would like to receive, but still expecting acceptance in return. In this instance, we see that the way people's emotions influence their perceptions of other issues can interfere with their ability to empathize. The people performing these criminal acts are so engulfed in their issues that they cannot see that other people who they are attacking are going through a similar crisis. Both groups strive for acceptance and legitimacy, yet both still strive to hurt each other. If we look back on some of the conflicting actions and ideas mentioned in this project, such as the scientific proof that homosexuality is transferred through a gene, and yet the prevalence of ideas stating that it is still a choice, the amount of movements for peace and acts of violence being committed by the same groups, and the idea that many people believe that they are born with their sexuality intact, yet they believe others who are homosexual are not born with theirs intact, we begin to notice patterns. Many of these conflicts are emotionally charged. They are also often politically, religiously, or scientifically charged, meaning that a group of people might have reason to believe both conflicting ideas. When our core belief systems become confused, we tend to attempt to protect ourselves, or we have destructive fears of attacks on our belief system. Within many of the examples given, we notice that subjects attempt to protect their core value systems. This attempt to protect their values results in either an unwillingness to accept opinions that conflict with their ideals, such as in the case of those who refuse to accept that human sexuality is inherent, or direct attacks towards the beliefs of others, such as in the case of the militant homosexual group. We may now ask ourselves, in this case, does cognitive dissonance affect people's ability to empathize? The evidence points towards the idea that this dissonance does affect the instigator's ability to identify with those who have conflicting views. Since the individuals in these arguments have such steadfast views on the subject, any conflicting ideas trigger the self-protection mechanism, which renders them incapable of attempting to identify with the other side of the argument. This innate reaction means that those with strong views on this or any subject where strong personal views can lead to cognitive dissonance will have a much more difficult time feeling empathy towards the opposers of their ideas.
Cognitive dissonance causes people to dig in their heels and hold on to their beliefs, even when faced with overwhelming evidence to the contrary. There is something deeply troubling about cognitive dissonance, since it suggests that we double down on our beliefs in light of conflicting evidence. When people's self-confidence is rattled, generally when facts intrude their thinking, they may become even more bent on sticking to their beliefs. Although it is natural to assume that a persistent and enthusiastic advocate of a belief is brimming with confidence, the advocacy might in fact signal that the individual is boiling over with doubt. This brings up the common argument that those who show the most hostility toward the LGBT community are the ones who are more likely to have undercover same-sex desires of their own. It appears that sometimes those who would oppress others have been oppressed themselves, and we can have compassion for them too. They may be less accepting of others because they cannot be accepting of themselves. This, however, is not always the case, and assumptions of people should not be made based on their opinions alone.
Denial and avoidance are among the most important psychological concepts to subjective truth. What keeps people from having empathy for others? Cognitive dissonance relates to the concept of being exposed to information or having experiences that conflict with our existing base of what we know. The theory holds that our minds are not always flexible or rational when it comes to evaluating uncomfortable information or questioning our own beliefs due to bias. Dissonant cognitions will cause us to dismiss or alter conflicting information or add justification to one side or the other, not necessarily rationally, in order to regain psychological balance. It's an important concept to consider in terms of the way people block things out or justify things to themselves. It is extremely difficult to maintain a vigilantly open mind or empathize. Whatever your dominant perspective or worldview happens to be, it is inevitable that we will sometimes use rationalizations in order to save the time or mental stress of dealing with conflicting information. Cognitive dissonance is actually a necessary and natural mental function, but it is also a phenomenon that we should be aware of in ourselves and others, as a process that does not always serve us well in the quest for objectivity and truth. This has even affected my own ability to empathize with the side of the issue with which I do not agree. Because I believe homosexuality is not a choice, and because I abstain from practicing organized religion, I do not always accept the evidence and beliefs held by those whose views differ from my own. I experience cognitive dissonance because I may think my views are better and more rational only because they support a minority group. In reality, my views undermine the beliefs and traditions of countless individuals and groups, which is not a positive effect. We often use what we know to justify our own views and attack contrary evidence as a defense mechanism.
In conclusion, one becomes aware that the cognitive dissonance can greatly affect a person or group's ability to empathize with others. In the issues of whether homosexuality is a choice or an inherent quality, and whether homosexuality should be accepted into society, the cognitive dissonance involved in both parties causes confusion, self-protection responses, and eventually a decrease in the ability to feel empathy for the other party. The same concept can be applied to nearly any conflict that arises because of the opposing views of two different parties. It is visible within the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Each side feels victimized by the other. Neither side wants to deviate from the peace of their religion, yet both sides want to defend the legitimacy of their religion and proof that they deserve their homeland. Their self-protection responses overpower their emotional need to empathize with the other religion and show the love and peace that their religious doctrines declare is just. The concept can be applied to World War II, simple schoolyard conflicts, bullying, and numerous other examples. In the end, if each individual and group became aware of the malicious effects that cognitive dissonance creates in their lives, they might be able to show more compassion towards those around them.